Thank you for this important session, Dr. Rogers. We are now joined live by Dr. Eugene Rogers, as well as the presenters for our next session. For the next several minutes, these gentlemen will unpack the points just presented by Dr. Rogers, and then we will proceed directly into our next session, turning empathy into action, eliminating bias and barriers in the choral classroom. I'd like to introduce our two new panelists at this time. Tesfa Wondemagegnehu is Assistant Professor of Music and conducts the Viking Chorus and the Chapel Choir at St. Olaf College. He maintains an active voice studio and teaches music and social justice with the goal of helping bridge the gap of social injustice through music, dialogue, and inspiring participants to take action in their communities. Dr. Jeffery Redding, the 2019 Grammy Music Educator Award recipient, is the Director of Choral Activities at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Redding is the Executive and Artistic Director of the Orlando Choral Society, and he also serves as the Director of Worship Arts for the First United Methodist Church of Orlando. Formerly with the Moses Hogan Singers, he remains active as a singer in the professional male singing group, Brethren. Welcome to Choral Panorama. I'll turn it over first, I believe, to Tesfa.
We can't hear you.
I was basically giving Jason praise for those fantastic introductions. I'm glad you let me know that, Eugene. But thank you, Jason, for those fantastic introductions. And it's so great to see my bros on the screen right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Look, let me tell you, watching your video, that tea was tea that needed to be spilt this morning. And so grateful for you and all the work that you are doing in this profession, in this vocation, Eugene. It is truly a blessing that you are willing to share and continue to share your gift and your heart with us. So thank you for that video. And
keep up with you all.
No, man, we all in this together. We all in the grind. It is a grind. It's a daily grind, and we're doing the best that we can to make it happen. So I was just gonna ask you a few questions. These are some things that I, just picked up from the video, and I know some of the teachers might be having some questions, and I don't think that we have the chat enabled in a way. So I just basically picked a few questions from the opening bit, and Dr. Redding has picked a few questions from the last bit of the video, and you can help us out with them. I am very familiar with Joel Thompson's work, Seven Last Words, and you mentioned that through the programming of that work, you began to realize the music eventually opened the door for our conversations to turn into critical discourse about the more sensitive matters of the work. And in a time where folks are concerned about openly expressing their personal beliefs, some find it easier to retreat to silence or echo the majority opinion. As you mentioned, nearly 4 out of 10 people don't see embracing diversity as a positive change. Now, that was outside of the choral sphere. But how have you handled it?
I lost a little bit of that.
All right, I'll go back. I said, as you mentioned, nearly 4 out of 10 people don't see embracing diversity as a positive change.
Sure.
And I'm saying, how have you handled that those dissenting opinions while fostering critical discourse on these present issues? And like, what are some tools that you've used?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
With that particular work, I do think that was 5 years ago, and I do think we're in a slightly different time now. But I can tell you just quickly with that process, one of the big things that I did was I tried to find the universality of the work. I think it is very key to, when you're entering in a situation where you have disparate opinions, that you say, what can we all agree on? Because there's something we all can agree on the value of human life. And so that's where I started. And I sat right in the middle of that and really allowed them to not feel like they had to think this way or this way, but try to make sure we were presenting fact. This is what actually happened, whether you agree with it or not, but this is fact. and this, so highlighting what we agreed on, I think, and the students knew that they could trust me with that, that I wasn't going to look down on them because they didn't share maybe this thought. And I rarely even shared my own opinion. I tried to make sure that they knew that they could enter in their own way, with music being that piece is brilliantly conceived. So whether you choose to talk about, and I think you miss out on a lot to only talk about the music, right? But but that becomes our door, the universal theme, and the excellence in the music, that to me together provided an opportunity for, I think, the students to then begin to sort of let the barriers come down, to let the layers of the onion begin to peel away. And that shocked me, right? How that organically happened. And I think for me, that's what I would also encourage. I also will say this. I have gotten to the point in my life now where I'm no longer really trying to convince people. I believe that we must, and I learned this from a University of Michigan student, because I used to spend so much time trying to get these people over here who just were completely against. I got to get them on our side. And this student said, Dr. Rogers, I think I just am not interested in that anymore. And it touched me. I really think I'm here, that I'm more interested in the people who say, you know what, I don't know I got a lot to learn. I want to grow. I'm going to lock arms with those folks, and we're going to, and I'm going to work with them. And those who are over here, hopefully they'll join us, but I'm not spending my energy there. I'm spending my energy with those folks that said, I want to grow and I want to learn. And I find that is where I'm going today. So I used to spend a lot of energy trying to change people's minds, and I don't know if that's going to happen. So
your focus is on that movable middle, people who are interested in doing that work.
Absolutely.
Amen.
That's Amen. Where I am. That's where I am today.
And so another question I had, you mentioned that you are interested in what choices that will be made to affect power, money, resources, decision-making, regulations, and practices. And I'm wondering, what are some of those specific choices that can be made to affect the issues you mentioned? What tactics do you employ to get students to be citizen artisans and activists in this way?
Yeah, so as much as I really love, I was listening to a podcast this week, as much as I really love white fragility, I think it has a lot of value. The thing that I don't appreciate about it is that it does not focus on the work itself. It tends to focus more on people looking inward and having these sessions where, I feel bad, blah, 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 blah. So, but until we have people who are actually getting involved in action items and not necessarily feeling like they've got to focus on feeling bad or this, let your actions speak first. And for me, those actions, that can be anything from, I think that's why I focus on relationships. I think that has to come organically through relationships, through getting out into the community, through allowing and getting connected to people. I think the more people can, as we know, we hear this all the time, but it's more we can actually have folks engage and interact firsthand with people who are not like them and have real relationships. I'm sorry, I just don't think you can't be changed. That's how I've changed. I grew up very different than where I am today. And how did that come about? Because of relationships, because of firsthand experience. So I think that using the repertoire, having a great experience with that music and guests, and then the people and people that we're with, those are some of the ways as citizen artists. I'm focusing on musicians and our singers. There are other ways, obviously, that as a world we could do this, but power and position and all, and I think for our singers as well, I talked about the audition process and how we look, what do we consider as acceptable people to make our advanced choirs. This is huge because sometimes, as I said in that lecture, sometimes we already set up a barrier, maybe not even knowingly. It's just we're conditioned this way, that only these things are of value, that we miss out on a whole group of students that have other strengths and abilities that maybe not be on that checklist that could add more. And these are things that I mean, I could go on and on about it, but that's to answer your question quickly.
When thinking about higher ed, like, you know, the big question is, how can we even restructure some of our audition practices to enter into these programs?
Absolutely.
Because some of these programs are so competitive, and it's based off of a standard, as you mentioned earlier, this Eurocentric standard. And, you know, as we start to retrain our educators to be prepped for these environments, especially coming from predominantly white institutions, those are going to be things that we wrestle with at least for the next 20 to 30 years. So I'm so grateful that you're doing that work, Dr. Rogers.
I try to every day, and it's not easy because, yes, you may have that mindset, but you have these students entering in programs where you may have colleagues that are not with you. So I find sometimes you're also trying to educate your colleagues or work with those students so that they don't get discouraged by this situation or not with another colleague. I mean, especially in higher ed now, but that can happen. So you have to, yes, bring them in, but retention and them having success in that program is also very key.
Absolutely.
So.
Dr. Rogers, hello, how you doing?
Hello, how you doing? Jeffrey, Dr. Redding.
Good to see you, dear friend. I have a question for you. You talked about diversifying rep and having that in terms of how you teach your students. Can you talk about the importance of not being afraid to touch pieces that you may not be familiar with to educate the whole? You hit on that, and I just think that's very important.
Well, I mean, I think we all, this point is so interesting to me because people won't say that about encountering a piece from the European repertoire. They'll just get in the practice room and they'll learn it. They'll go to the library and they'll research it. But somehow or another, when we get to, again, and this is where appropriation is used to not do the repertoire, right? Sometimes when we get to a piece of music or a style that we don't know about, it is so easy to say, oh, I can't do that. I don't know it. Well, there's no excuse today. I mean, if COVID has done anything for us, it has shown us that everybody is simply a Zoom link away, that whatever it takes for me to connect to those experts, and this is where IFCM and finding like people from all across the world who maybe know, yes, European music, but also their own cultural repertoire. Why not connect to these colleagues? Ask them, can we have a conversation? You know, I just, for me, there's no excuse today in connecting to people. That's the key though. And I think we have to, and I'll say it again, as I said in the video, we have to push publishers to do a bit more legwork as well, so that people have scores in front of them that give them even a baseline or links to resources to really connect it to that culture. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I believe about it.
I don't know how much time we have. I have one more quick question.
I think we're about out of time, but one more quick question. We'll make it quick.
Okay. I really appreciate how you said oftentimes the Negro spiritual, people like to end in it for it to be, okay, fun. But there are times that you can start one, or you can put it in the middle of a program. It's all about programming and how does it flow. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, you know, for me, I think about if depending on how your program is structured, if you're going after universal themes, every culture in the world, you talk about human emotions. So a style of music can deal with all of those emotions, right? So therefore, I can have an African piece that talks about this, or a Chinese piece, or a Latinx piece. I don't have to always start with my typical style. And so for me, I like to think about the program in terms of the message, the overall arch, and let a variety of repertoire be exposed to the audience at any point, not just at the end, not just as a piece of entertainment. I think it limits so much of what I think a particular community can offer when we only program certain types of pieces and then place them at certain times. I think hopefully people are getting this message. I think this is one that I feel like people are starting to realize that I can't always stick my gospel piece or my spiritual at the end. I don't think it's a problem to do that, right?
Right.
I'm going to end with my Andre Thomas piece at the end because I want to, but it's not because I only do that.
Exactly.
Thank you so much,
Perfect.
Dr. Rogers.
I just adore you. You're fantastic, and good luck with your next session.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Take care, guys.
Probably.
All righty. All right. So it looks like it's just us. I didn't know if Jason Locker was going to be joining us again to say anything, but I think it's just us. We can just jump in. Jason, I'm just going to go ahead and make that executive call. All right. So as we've just heard Dr. Rogers share all of this incredible information, if you can just make sure you pull up that video, this Hal Leonard sponsored video online. This is something that I would recommend showing to your students in the fall.
Absolutely.
This is a great resource that we can all learn from and pull from for years to come. So please keep referring back to that. So as we jump into our topic for a little bit, as we're looking to action, that's the big word of our topic, action. What comes next? What's the thing? What does this work look like in the actual classroom? How does this conversation start? And I think we have to first acknowledge that there is and always has been unresolved issues in this country. And I want to start by reading you an excerpt from Eddie Glaude's book, Begin Again, James Baldwin's America, and its urgent lessons for our own. Now, this book just came out. I strongly recommend you read it. He basically talks about the lie that is perpetuated in this country. And I want to just open with an excerpt from his chapter called The Lie. Glaude says, American history would be contorted in the service of it, where efforts to resist the likes of slavery or to break the back of Jim Crow segregation would be conscripted into the grand story of America's greatness and its ongoing perfection. Slavery would be banished from view or seen as a mistake instead of a defining institution of systemic cruelty in pursuit of profit. That history would fortify our national identity. And any attempt to confront the lie itself would be sabotaged by the fear that we may not be who we say we are. For white people in this country, America is an identity worth protecting at any cost. And I want to read that last bit again because it's something that we need to really wrestle and grapple with this morning. That history, the history of slavery, would fortify our national identity, and any attempt to confront the lie itself would be sabotaged by the fear that we may not be who we say we are. For white people in this country, quote unquote, America is an identity worth protecting at any cost. And in recent days, you've seen Representative Cotton actually introduce Do Not Forget American History 2020 in direct response to the New York Times Pulitzer Prize winning story called 1619. If you are not familiar with this resource called 1619, especially the third episode that's on music, I would strongly recommend that you take out your Android device right now or your iPhone device and go and download the podcast 1619. It's a long form podcast, but it's great information. But the fact that politicians right now are introducing legislation for us to forget that the first slaves stepped foot on US soil in 1619, and that is not a part of our American history. We need to understand that people are willing to protect it at any cost. And so if you are in your classroom and you're saying, all right, I need to have this conversation, but I'm afraid. And Dr. Rogers pointed us to some phenomenal resources. He talked to you about So You Want to Talk About Race by Oluo. Maybe you want to begin your journey by looking at Kendi's How to Be Anti-Racist, or Reynolds and Kendi's collaboration called Stamped. But I think we got to sing this morning. Jeff, I think we got to do a little singing. We got to get people. This is the Florida Vocal Association. We got to do a little bit of singing. So I'm gonna lead us in a little bit, and you just repeat after me. It's a super easy song. I'm gonna teach you. Here we go. I gotta turn on my keyboard for a second. Here we go. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared.
I know you're scared.
And I'm scared too.
And I'm scared too.
But here I am.
But here I am.
Right next to you.
Right next to you.
You better go after that high note, Dr. Redding. I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as we think about those words, we have to put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. It takes you as educators taking those first steps in your classroom, as Dr. Rogers talks about. So Dr. Redding, if you'd be willing to share with us, talk about some of those steps that you have been taking in your classrooms for years. You are so recognized, and I've watched you take those steps, leading with love and building community. And one of the words that you use is unity, building unity in your program. Would you talk to us about that?
Well, one of the first things that I've had to learn about my life was really what was my biases. And oftentimes, the things that I've gone through in the struggle of just being a core director, I've been a Black core director, and whatever attacks that I've had to go through and so on and so forth. So therefore, the empathy that I needed to create for a situation was, how can I put myself in that person's shoes to feel how they feel, and then reverse it. At the end of the day, you realize as an educator, you're going to teach people who believe in you and who don't believe in you. And at the end of the day, you're teaching children, or you're teaching adults, or whomever you teach, they have a background, and they have, they bring their baggage to the table. So your job is to what? Instruct them in love. That being said, so mirror, mirror on the wall. The first thing, look at yourself.
Yep.
Look at. The next thing that so my time at West Orange High School, it was one of those things in which I didn't know the history till I got there, and then when different things came at me, and I was like, okay, this is weird. Let me try to create an environment then. And then I had to focus on the students, not their baggage, not their issue, not the student, and love the student. And I had to love them through it, at the same time protecting myself, at the same time being aware of my own biases. So therefore, how do you destroy this? Unity. The power of music has the power to touch, change, inspire lives. And there's a lyric for every piece of music. Every situation, there's music that you have. So that being said, I had to be open. I had to be vulnerable of my struggle, and then love them through theirs. And then once they start singing, you cease to see their color, you cease to see their background, and you hear their spirit. And that's when it started to change. And then you realize you can do all types of music because they trust you about relationship.
And you talk about there's a lyric for every scenario. We're going to jump into that conversation directly. Dr. Rogers also mentioned scholar and author Robin DiAngelo's work. And I want to just basically excerpt a bit from her opening. I mean, there are people now that are pushing back against DiAngelo's words. It's Eugene saying that the work is only within and focused on oneself, but the work is also external. There are also people saying that her words can be a little bit of rhetorical bullying, if you will. But coming from years of working in media, I can say that the first few lines of her chapters make this book worth a read. So here's an excerpt. DiAngelo says, "We are socialized into these groups collectively. In mainstream culture, we all receive the same messages about what these groups mean, why being in one group is a different experience from being in another. And we also know that it is, quote unquote, better to be in one of these groups than to be in its opposite. For example, to be young rather than old, able-bodied rather than have a disability, rich rather than poor. We gain our understanding of group meaning collectively through aspects of the society around us that are shared and unavoidable. Television, movies, news items, song lyrics, magazines, textbooks, schools, religions, literature, stories, jokes, traditions, practices, histories, and so on and so on and so on. These dimensions of our culture shape our group identities. Now, folks might be sitting on this Zoom thinking, what does unpacking these tough conversations look like via Zoom with my students these fall? If you happen to be one of those educators who will be starting the school year providing remote learning opportunities for those students. And I want to point you to some very specific resources as we begin to have these conversations. I'm going to do the screen share for a second. Dr. Jason has basically given us some opportunities to let this happen. So I'm hoping that the technology doesn't fail us. Let me know if you can see. Here we go. I'm gonna share. Can y'all see anything yet?
Mm-mm.
You can't see anything, Dr. Redding?
No, sir.
All right. So I'm going to read you this since the technology is being a little bit fickle right now. Janet Helms basically talks about the white racial identity model of when people actually interact with their ability to see and understand race in this country. And so, Jeff, you mentioned about not being able to see color.
Right.
And see, Helms basically says, in the first stage of contact, the individual adheres to the colorblind model. They see racial difference, but do not find it salient, and in fact may feel that racism is in fact propagated by the discussion and acknowledgement of race as an issue. Now, people might look at that and say, all right, what does that look like in practice if I'm trying to get my students specifically to look at these documents and to have a conversation? I am going to put an actual URL. If you can see the URL in this actual chat, this will be a Google Doc that will give you media resources that you can see. It's in the chat now. Go to it. This is to everybody. Here we go. You should be able to see that URL. If hopefully you can see that URL. I'll just put it in there. But some of those resources, if people enter this conversation and don't necessarily have the bandwidth to understand that they're being problematic in your classroom, you can point them to podcasts like Whistling Vivaldi. And I'll give you a few seconds just in case you can't see that URL. Whistling Vivaldi, it's a National Public Radio podcast. If you're looking for a video that you can show them, it's called I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown, Art of the Sermon. If you're looking for activities that you can use, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. And these are all things. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is from a document that I didn't curate that has been passed around all over the internet in recent months. It's called a Scaffolded Anti-Racist Resource. And it gives you basically ways to donate. If you feel like this resource is something that's beneficial to you, this is something that I would strongly recommend that you check out, make those donations, but know that people are entering these conversations at different places. As Dr. Rogers mentioned, 40%, almost 40% of the people in the classroom might be in a place where they don't feel like having this more diverse and beautiful society, embracing diversity as a positive change, y'all. Like, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And yes, you're, as Dr. Rogers said, you're not looking to convince them to change. You're not trying to change their minds, but we have to realize that there are a lot of people who are interacting in our classrooms who will see, especially when we think about how polarized we've come in recent years, they might not be buying the Kool-Aid that you're trying to get them to sip. I just want to put it out there like that. And I will tell you, when you look at the Pew Research from 2018, they break it down even better for us to see. It says 45% of high school degree or less educated people say that growing diversity makes the country a better place. 42% says it doesn't make much difference, and 11% says it makes the country worse. So if you think about that, that's 53% of the people who are basically like indifferent or saying that it makes the country worse. That's a lot of people in our classrooms who are high school educated or less, who are basically in this position where we're trying to have anti-racism conversations, and they might not be buying the hype that we're selling. Dr. Redding, as you start in the fall at UCF, and you look to, if we have college educators who are watching right now, if you're looking to craft a message specifically for your new environment, what are some of the tactics you think you'll be bringing into the University of Central Florida and cultivating that culturally responsive environment that Eugene brought up earlier?
Well, the one thing that I'm looking forward to doing is, what is our song going to be? What song are we going to sing together that's going to unify us? The power is through music. So therefore, my job is to create that environment where you feel safe to sing pieces. So what's going to be the UCF theme song, or something that we're going to connect with? And so that's one thing that we're going to do with Dr. Kelly Miller, and then we're going to bring everyone together. Anyone who's going to be an educator, who's going out into the field, the one thing that I want to do at UCF is to teach. At the end of the day, it's not that deep. I'm going to teach, but I'm going to teach my heart. I'm going to teach loving everyone, accepting everyone. People will agree, people will disagree with you, but you respect all. So the minute a kid from UCF graduates, they will be able to do any type of music, come from any place, but also realize that first, it's students first, music second. You love people first. You build that bond, then they go with you, and then you educate. The minute you put music before students, you lose. Every time. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Because they're going to disagree with you on some pieces, but I'm going to love you enough to give you this. I'm going to give you this. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. We're going to come here, but I'm going to give you the best where you can come from a scholarly standpoint, but an emotional standpoint with a whole lot of empathy to be able to relate to people who are not like you, to give them the best that you have. So that's where I'm coming from. And then internship, and let's just change the world one person at a time. Let's go.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk about, let's say you were looking to find a piece of music, going back to what Jeff mentioned earlier, a piece of music to have this conversation. I will tell you that one piece that I've used specifically in my environment, as you start to dig into the text, is a piece that two of our leading folk song and spiritual arrangers collaborated on, called No Color. This is a collaboration by Sean Kirshner and Stacey Gibbs. And I want to just read you the opening lines. I believe they're going to share it with the broader population so you can see the text in its entirety. But basically the lines are: no color can come between us, no shade to be thrown, no tone be taken to demean us, no hue of hate to be shown. No color, no shade, no tone, let me be transparent with you. And the song goes on and says, more love is our intention. Stop. Did we forget to mention that we are more alike than different? And so as Dr. Rogers, Eugene talked about this movable middle, if you will, these people who basically would look at that text and see, this is a unifying text. We will see that this is a unifying text for a lot of people in our choir environments. But there are some people who will be in that same environment that will start to question the motive of the text. Is this text asking us to be colorblind? And one of the ways that we had this conversation was have students break down the work of researchers, of these cultural anthropologists, of these sociologists who are in the fields doing work, and they're researching, saying, oh my goodness, this is how I've been racialized in this country. This is how I've been socialized in my white identity. Here's a piece of music that talks about racial identity. And now let me share with you as a Black student, let me share with you my lived experience. Let me share with you what that lived experience looks like. And as you start to cultivate that, you're like, all right, well, wait a minute. You asking me to ask my students to be willing to share in their school environment? That's not realistic. But I want to read Donna Kuhn's little nugget, this golden nugget from Invitation to the Party, because it talks about how you begin that work. You don't come up with the idea first. The work has to start with you going directly to those students and going to the people and the culture bearers who are willing to share if you approach them in the right way. Right. My friend Philip Schultz said, you know, there are a lot of organizations who are fantastic at organizing a barbecue. They make all the food, they bring all the sides, they got the wine and everything, and then they say, let me invite you over to the big barbecue. And then all of a sudden, all these people come over and they're realizing, oh, wait a minute, we probably should have asked them, hey, what kind of stuff are you interested in before you come over to this barbecue? If you're saying you're really looking to cultivate relationships with those communities who've been pushed to the margins. And so Kuhn says, I define audience development as the cultivation and growth of long-term relationships, firmly rooted in a philosophical foundation that recognizes and embraces the distinctions of race, age, sexual orientation, physical disability, geography, and class. Audience development, as we think about development of our own audience members in our classrooms, is also the process of engaging, educating, and motivating diverse communities to participate in a creative experience as an important partner. Let me repeat that, as an important partner in the design and execution of the arts. And as co-directors, we are so often these benevolent dictators. It's a top-down approach. Yeah. And I think that there's space for that to happen, but as people are starting to push back against that, when you think about how people, Jeffrey, I'm not going to set you up with this question. Mm-hmm. You went to the Jones High School. Who was your choir director at Jones High School, Jeff?
The legendary Edna Sampson Hargret.
Now, let's be real. I'm pretty sure there were a lot of well-intentioned white people wanting to do collaborations with Ms. Hargret at Jones High School. What do you think her first approach was? Do you think that she approached it with open arms, or do you think she actually was questioning some of the motives before that conversation moved further?
At that time, it was questioning the motives. But then you had people like Dan Gordon and some other folks who are legendary in Orlando that bonded really well with Ms. Hargret. That was not Black. But at first, it was always, what's your motive? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So y'all hear that? The motive part of it is like, if now you're saying, I want to do this work, but I want to do this work because everybody's doing this work. This work is quote unquote woke. And you're doing this work because that's what your school district is saying, that you have to do anti-racism work. You got to check your heart first.
That's right. Absolutely.
You got to check your heart first. And I want to ask you, because I look at you, Dr. Redding, as a cultural architect in the Central Florida area. You have been doing a lot of these types of collaborations. Would you be willing to share with us how you've approached this work with Orlando Choral Society, with First United Methodist, with West Orange High School, and your career in the past few years?
Well, basically, again, I have to first study it. Secondly, bring in people who will know more than me. But I also, before I bring them in, I want to check their heart. Meaning that I want to make sure that not only they have the knowledge, but they also mean well by whomever I put you in front of. Mm-hmm. Test, if I can bring you and put you in front of any of my groups and rest well. And you will have the knowledge. You bring someone else who may have the knowledge, but don't have the wherewithal to connect. I'm hesitant to put you in front of those people because why? It's about relationship first. Mm-hmm. And if your agenda is not the same agenda as mine in terms of my singers and making them better and making myself better, I would love to see you at the convention and shake your hand and how are you doing? But standing in front of the singers ain't gonna happen on my watch because as educators, we have to also be aware of our students' emotional stability. I don't care.
Come on, preach, Jeff. Come on.
I don't care if you're 20 or 100. You are mandated, you are charged to protect their hearts first. And then you can add everything else. So I can care less if you have all the knowledge. If you got all the other stuff, I'd never put you in front because they will remember that, not what was really supposed to be going on. So that being said, I work with people all the time, and I sit and I try to build relationships. And I want my students, to sing with CFCRs, or my church or anyone, the Orlando Gay Chorus. Can we do something with this group over here? Let's do something with that. So I want you to be able to do Beethoven, but I want you to do Andre Thomas also. I want you to be able to do it all and not allow your color to dictate what you can do, but your mind. And that's how I operate. So it doesn't matter what group it is.
I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you so much, because I see the work that you are doing. You are always doing these major collaborations in the cities. And I think people in the Florida area can turn to you for guidance and basically look at all of the incredible work that you've been doing and see ways that they can learn best practices from those things. So thank you, Dr. Redding, for sharing.
And the thing about it is, thank you, Tess. And the thing about it, we're all in this together and we're all learning. We don't have all the answers. The pitfall is thinking that you have them all. You don't. You don't. And listen, the more I learn, the more I know, the more I realize I don't know. And therefore, I must continue to learn to serve others. You have to be a servant leader all day, every day.
Come on now. Servant leader all day, every day. We need can that be a bumper sticker somewhere? Servant leader all day. Can it be every day though? Not every day, every day.
And then you have to add serve in the midst of rejection, because everybody ain't gonna like what you gotta give.
All right, everybody ain't gonna like what you gotta give.
Understand.
Now, I brought that day up because this brings us to a great transfer point. Is Eugene, in his video, he talked about some of this bias work. He said that one of the things he specifically mentioned, he says, I don't think that people will think I am less competent because of my gender. But I want us to add more right now, because I am intentionally living in my Memphis Black self, and I've been doing this a lot more, because I think that goes even further how we can perpetuate white supremacy by assimilating and code switching to this white normative behavior. And so I want to ask us, I don't think that people will think I am less competent because of my clothing. Look, I got on a polo and a baseball cap, or because of my grammar. Like, how many students are in your environment that basically look at the way that you interact with them, and we see that, oh my goodness, this is not my cup of tea, and we've been excluding them because of those types of interactions. Am I saying that you need to all of a sudden, as a white educator, start using Ebonics? Look, y'all, please do not leave this session going into the hallways talking to BIPOC students trying to use slang and hip lingo. Don't do it. Don't do it. But what I am saying to you is that if those students are in your room, don't try to provide corrective behavior in a way that can exclude them and single them out, because if that's their lived experience, if that's the way that they know how to communicate, we need to validate that. One of the things that Dr. Rogers talked about is excellence. Well, that excellence can transfer to every part of the way we interact. Is there excellence in the way that word is problematic? Is there excellence in the way that these students are dressed? Is there excellence in tone quality? Like, he brought that up about tone quality. Look, I know about FVA MPAs. They know Joe. Look, you get that superior with distinction. There's some judges out there, and I'm not putting judges on blast, but there's some judges out there that got some very specific ideas of what a superior with distinction is. And as we really want to wrestle with bias, the bias conversation has to start with the rubric. Like, if you are sitting at a judges panel for Florida Vocal Association and you're basically writing down superior, excellent, good, fair, poor, and you're writing that, you are not critiquing the actual rubric itself. What are we doing? Because that means it's lip service. It becomes performative and not actually action. And so, so I want to ask you, as someone who lives in Florida, and we think about, you're just leaving the MPA process and stuff like that, and think about some of the comments that you have gotten over this illustrious career that you built down at West Orange High School. I want you to be honest, spill some tea. Have you had any opportunities where you felt like a judge was being biased? You can answer this honestly. You ain't got to name names, but I do want you to answer that honestly. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can say no to this question.
I got 23 years of experience and I have all the names right here. No, I'm just joking. But have I dealt with bias? Absolutely, absolutely. But I refuse to become a victim of it. And so for me, I look at, first of all, you have your circle of people who know you and know your work. And I will send recordings off if I don't, tell me what you think and so on and so forth. Because have I had judges who because it was West Orange High School and everything that comes along with that, were they a little bit? Absolutely. Have I gone to other districts and they judge a little lighter than they do Orange County? Absolutely. I've seen that whole thing. So have I dealt with it? Absolutely. But the thing I say this, have I also been judged fairly? Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
So I got to say that also, I'm not a victim, but have whatever it comes with being at that school and the work that we've done, you got to understand it. Yes. Because the thing is, at West Orange High School, the assumption is most of them have voice lessons. The assumption is they're all the top kids around. It was a lot of, and the more I was there, the more I realized what was that. I said, no. Let me tell you how it really is. We work hard every year, and sometimes we start ground zero every year. But I'm a builder. So that being said, when I get a rating, I look at the process, not the product. I focus on the process of life. The product takes care of itself. Even though everyone has a different opinion of your product, I go back to my process. And so therefore, that kept me grounded and kept me rooted. Now, so that being said, then what do you tell your students? I'm not going to sit there and say, I'm going to tell my students every rating. I'm not going to hide the ratings. I'm going to let them know exactly what it is and how do you feel. And 9 times out of 10, your students are harder on themselves than you can be. Number two, number two, if we get a rating that we don't agree with, you will not be a victim. You go back, you fix some things, but you realize don't sing for the rating. You got to go back to touch, change, and inspire lives. If you handle every situation as an inspiration and giving, then as you would say, my brother, you sing to inspire, not to impress, and you let someone's opinion take care of themselves. And so that's how I've moved. And now, have I seen some judges who are judge their choir they'll judge your choir really, really hard, but you look at their choir and are you kidding me? Yes, because sometimes we believe our own hype. And my professor always said, don't believe the press. Don't ever believe you're as good as you think you are, because the minute you do, you stop growing. So you have those people too. So you just smile, focus on your kids and say bye, and you keep going.
Look, you are delivering all the sermons I need to hear. Like, you are lifting my spirits, because you did that in a very diplomatic way. I want the record to state you did that in a very, very diplomatic way. But I want to, as we said, this session is about action. So if you are watching and you are at an FVA meeting today, I just put in here, they're going to share it with you right now, is the Black Voices Matter pledge.org, Black Voices Matter pledge.org. If you can look at that document and start to ask those questions specifically in that FVA meeting, if you get pushback, that lets you know that folks ain't serious about this work. And you might feel that that's too direct. But we are at a time, as Al Sharpton said, as he was preaching at George Floyd's funeral, just 40 miles up the road from this basement right here in Northfield, Minnesota. Al Sharpton said, time's up, y'all. Time is up. The time is now. Your students are going to come back, a lot of them hungry for these types of changes, hungry for these types of conversation. And in that first document that I sent you, this scaffolded anti-racist document, a lot of your students might be on contact, but I want you to scroll down some, y'all. Scroll down. Some of your students might be already on autonomy. Some of your students might be at the bottom of the document where they are extremely ready to do the work, and they're talking about decolonizing. And that's a term that you can dig into as you start to realize people are at different points when they even enter this conversation. And it's terrifying to begin the conversation, because you are afraid that somebody that's more woke than you, quote unquote woke than you, might call you out. And I want to read you this quote from Marlon James. He is the Man Booker Prize. He's an award winner. Man Booker Prize is one of the highest awards in the UK for literature. And you know, he's a professor at a college called McAllister College, but his quote is pretty straightforward and simple. He says, every crow thinks he's the blackest, but now everybody has been throwing down, showing off their woke credentials by showing how many less woke people they can roast over the coals, or who's roasting they can like on Facebook. Straight white men, as always, being the easiest target. You gotta love this about us progressives. We save our most vicious attacks and our most lethal venom for people on the same side. Listen, and as Dr. Rogers said to you at the beginning of his talk, we have to assume good intentions. That doesn't mean you excuse the impact. I want to be very clear that people can come to the table with good intentions, but we cannot ignore the impact and the harm that they can cause even while having good intentions. But if you see and you know that the people are trying to do the work and they might be entering this conversation at a different point, you can reference this actual document and figure out exactly where they are entering. Your job is to educate them. Your job is to basically point them in the right direction so that they can move from that point of contact and move all the way down the chart into autonomy and move into something that is really action, that can go after those things that we long for. When we talk about police reform, when we talk about economic justice, when we talk about, you know, a lot of people are not even talking about when we look at environmental racism, when we look at how our Black, brown, and indigenous communities are facing way worse pollution conditions, when they're looking at the actual grocery store chains and how many fast food restaurants are in their area. These are conversations that you can tackle with your students. As Dr. Rogers said, do a service project, tie it to music. I know that Andrea Ramsey has a great conversation piece about the Flint water crisis. If you're looking to say, oh, well, I don't know what music is out there, listen, there's tons of it. Look out, reach out to people like Andrea, reach out to people like Derek Fox, reach out to people like Dr. Redding here in the state of Florida. There's so many resources out there that can point you in the right direction to get you that conversation musical piece to get it started. And I will tell you, there's a free resource that is available called Justice Choir. If you don't know about the Justice Choir, if you don't have any budget money this fall, let's say you don't have budget money and you need to have music for your students to perform. Well, the Justice Choir is available free of charge. It's at justicechoir.org. You can download this songbook. But most of those songs in the Justice Choir gives you an actual conversation prompt, ways that you can interact with that conversation. Thank you for sharing that all. You can see that link now and the Black Voices Matter pledge. But I want to go back a little bit, and Dr. Redding, I want to push this because I know you sang, and I use the word sang intentionally because I want us to look at the first thing. As conductors, we pledge, and we intentionally put this first on the Black Voices Matter pledge. It says, embrace idiomatic Black choral music and find ways to incorporate respectful and thoughtful arrangements in your choral program. Contextualize this music with singers and audience. Now, as somebody who sings all the things, somebody I'm talking about you, Dr. Redding, how have you been able to broach those conversations when you perform music that might have influence of R&B, influence of hip hop, influence of straight up rap, influence of gospel, some of these idiomatic Black styles? How have you been able to have that conversation in your choral programs?
I allow my students to educate me. Because,
come on now.
Because at the end of the day, I know what I know, but they're in that world because of the age gap. So therefore, oftentimes I go to them and I say, okay, and then we find a happy medium in which we can meet halfway. You know, a perfect example, a story I tell often was one of my students came to me. He said, hey, Mr. Redding, I want a gospel choir. And it was my first year teaching. I said, no, I'm not going to do a gospel choir, but we'll do, you know, right now I'm going to teach tone. We'll do something by Palestrina. He said, Pala who? I said, Palestrina. And then and he said, man, he said, what? No gospel choir? I said, the only thing we'll do Black is called Black is the color of my true love's hair, and that ain't Black. And so, and then I said, okay, we'll do Kirk Franklin. He got mad at me. He said, man, what he said, he called me, he said, you're a sellout, you ain't Black. you ain't black. And I looked at myself, I said, I cannot be mistaken as nothing else. But I said, unfortunately, you see myself as a black educator. I said, I don't. And he got mad. I said, I see myself as an educator who happens to be black. So at the end of the day, I'm allowing my mind to give you everything. I know who I am and I'm proud of who I am. I know my heritage. So now let's build this together. Once I got him away from the color situation, he was able to educate me on some things, not educating him. Next thing you know, 2005, another situation, a wonderful choir I had was a special group, 2005. It was a bunch of kids and they wrote a song called Everybody Has a Story. And we was on tour and Sammy and Robert Jones, is a lot of kids. They literally wrote a song, wrote out the keys, taught the choir the gospel, and asked me to sit down.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down, and they educated me.
Didn't you?
I sat down. One kid was at the keys, one kid was, and the deal was this right here. If you can sing Siku Chebus, you can do anything I want you to do. Only thing I require from you is to have appropriate, healthy tone, and I'll let you go. They taught me, what did they teach me? They taught me that, first of all, if you trust us, we can do this together. They also let me know, sir, this is not your choir, this is our choir, and we are family.
Yeah.
So that's how, and so therefore, the next thing you know, they wanted to add praise dancers one year. And so next thing you know, I had black, white, Hispanic, Asian girls and a black girl teaching the art of praise dancing. All of a sudden, the kids stopped seeing color. They just wanted to do it. And so they started getting excited about Bach as well as Kurt Franklin. And I said, okay, done. And therefore, then you get a program of everything. And then you see mixed culture singing everything. So students oftentimes are the best teachers. They teach us if we allow them. Our job is to set up the environment and the rules and let them go and watch what happens.
And
one more thing.
Empowering students. Thank you for that.
You're empowering them. One more thing I want to say to the earlier session, when it came to district festival, do not allow yourself to be, you never allow a rating to dictate who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, at the end of the day, it's all about kids. It's all about it. You don't get yourself caught up into that, because once you do, you've lost. Don't do that.
Yep. So and I would say this is something that we can wrestle with even now, is that there's so many opinions of people who say what appropriate and healthy tone is. There are people who got opinions on what appropriate and healthy tone is. And let me make something clear, is that you can go and listen to Whitney Houston's early recordings. You can go and listen to those and hear that belt. And there are people who basically, because I will go ahead and just call out a text right now. In Richard Miller's structure of singing, as he's basically breaking down all of the different navigation points in the soprano voice, in the soprano or mezzo soprano voice, he instructs most people not to take their full chest voice to be healthy above E4. Now, what's interesting about that is that I know a lot of people who can sing in a healthy way in chest voice above E4.
All day. Yeah.
All day.
Easily.
All day.
Easily.
And so I want us to be ready to have that fight to say, you might think of this as your FVA judge, as this is what quote unquote healthy tone is. But the reality is no single perspective of what singing is can truly define what healthy and free tone is. And we have to have a more nuanced conversation in our choral organizations, and that includes ACDA, because I think if we did have those conversations, I think our performing choirs would be a lot different. I just want to put it out there like that.
And the thing about it is, to add on to that, Tessa, if you go to an ACDA convention, how many times have you heard a choir that did not have the same sound, but was still wonderful? Still a free sound. Still a free sound. We've heard many choirs that were from West Coast, East Coast, and their influence is based upon where they're from. And that sound is still wonderful. So oftentimes we get caught up into, well, this is how I would do it. And because I would do it this way, I'm the authority. No, you're not. There are many, listen, it's like cooking, baby. It's a lot of different flavors. You just can't just say, sorry.
So as y'all just heard Dr. Redding, there are many ways for us to slice this pie. There are different concepts of healthy sounds and stuff. And so I appreciate you for sharing that. And, you know, I 100% agree with you on that, and know that there's work and digging that has to be done. Now, one of the things that I would love for us to do, I know that you cannot ask questions, but I would love for us to sing again. I would love for us to jump back. I know, right? Jump back into singing. And there is a song from the Justice Choir songbook called Liberty and Justice for All. Liberty and Justice for All. And you don't need music for it. You don't need music for it, but I will sing this, just a few seconds of it, and I want you to connect with these words that have been crafted by Dr. Brandon Williams, who is at Rutgers University. This brother is extremely gifted, brilliant researcher and arranger and a composer. And so if you are not familiar, if you're looking for some of these BIPOC composers, you should definitely check out the works of Brandon Williams up at Rutgers. And so this piece is from the Justice Choir songbook. I'm gonna sing a little bit. Let me repeat after me. We are frightened.
We are frightened.
We are angry.
We are angry.
We are rising.
We are rising.
We are hopeful.
We are hopeful.
We are peaceful.
We are peaceful.
We are striving.
We are striving.
Won't stop fighting.
Won't stop fighting.
Won't stop marching.
Won't stop marching.
Won't stop dreaming.
Won't stop dreaming.
Won't stop loving.
Won't stop loving.
And proclaiming.
And proclaiming.
And believing.
And believing.
Our voices are united, louder than hate. We have gathered here. We've had all we can take. The time has come, you will hear our call. We're fighting for liberty and justice for all. And if we go back to what Dr. Rogers said, that universality of it all, if we can't all agree as we stand up in grade school and sometimes in middle school and high school, and we cite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and we do this for years and years and years, we're indoctrinated to pledge, but we can't get behind the words liberty and justice for all, there's a problem. Most people can, though. And so I want to read you just a small excerpt from Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech from 1852, because some people don't believe that this is a real thing. At the end of his speech, he says, I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. Now, I use this to not specifically talk about Blackness, but talk about all of these communities who have been pushed to the margins. When we think about those communities, when we especially think about those communities in the context of the words liberty and justice for all, you are creating a framework in your classroom for all of those students who've been marginalized for their entire lives to now become centered. We're going to decenter the norm. And we're now going to completely flip it and bring the margins to the middle. And so as we close this session out, I would really love it if you think about all of the things that we have said to you today. I'm so grateful for Dr. Redding taking this time and chatting with us. I know some people need a little bit of a bathroom break before their next session, so we're trying to give it to you. I think we're about 7 minutes over time, but just really think about ways that you can make your space more inclusive for all of those voices who have been pushed to the margins, and how you can now take this opportunity to center those voices. Dr. Redding, anything you want to add to the close out of it?
Hey, you know, it was again a pleasure working with my brother Tesfa and my brother Eugene, and just kind of tag teaming and doing this stuff together. Much love and respect and admiration for both of you in this fight that we're all in. And
Amen.
So just know it comes from the heart. Let's keep on serving. Keep on serving. Oh, and that's a cat. That's a cat.
That just happened. Yeah, we got 3 cats.
I'm like, Lord, that's a cat.
That's the perfect
Look,
end of
bro,
the session.
I don't do cats, and I saw one go right across the street. I said, oh, Lord.
So, hey, thank you so much. And now the cat is playing piano. Let me turn the volume down. But if Jason would be kind enough to come in and close us out of this session, thank you so much for having us.
Get rid of that cat.
Thank you so much for having us and creating this space for us to have this very needed and important dialogue.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. There it is again, Law. My life is not the same now.
Well, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you so much to Carlton Kilpatrick, Dr. Eugene Rogers, Tesfa Wondemagegnehu, and Dr. Jeffery Redding for an amazing morning of choral content to challenge us as we begin a new school year. Thank you also to our partners at Head's House of Music and Hal Leonard. An unattributed quote that I recently saw for the first time says, "People who wonder whether the glass is half empty or half full miss the point. The glass is refillable." Right. During unprecedented and challenging times, when we feel like our glass is half empty, it is important for us all to remember that we can lean on our colleagues to lift up and pour a refill into our glasses. I sincerely hope that today's Choral Panorama is refilling your glass. At this time, we're going to take a break for lunch. Please rejoin us at 1 o'clock Eastern Time for our next session. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.